Hi, I'm Ragni. I'm a multidisciplinary artist and designer in LA, and I like radical vulnerability and friendship and, pleasure.
Fuck yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. That's interesting. I'm now trying to think about the first time I feel like I was truly honest with my parents. I mean, maybe I'm not even there yet, but like, I try not to hide things if I don't have to. And I also think, like, yeah, I mean, with this woman, I think there is probably a debt she's incurring that she's not necessarily aware of.
Yeah. And also, I get why we hide things. I've done it. We've all done it. We're all children of immigrants, right? Like, I think there's so much shame involved with so many things that it's like hard to overcome that,
Yeah.
But I feel like once you get to a point where you're like, I can't feel shame about everything all the time because it's a really hard way to live.
It's exhausting.
Yeah, then you're like, okay, let's just be ourselves.
And let's like untangle a little bit. And you start to get to this point where you're like, what's the worst that can happen?
Yeah, and like maybe when you free yourself of that shame, it encourages someone else to free themselves of that shame too.
It's interesting. Like the first time that I realized I wanted to go to therapy, I was like 27 and I had like gone through something and I was like, I think I need like help dealing with this specific thing. And I remember when I told my mom, I like really wanted my mom. And one, she blamed me for the thing. And then two, she didn't mean to, but she did. And then two, she just like didn't want me to go to therapy. She's like, well, why don't you just like talk to family? And I was like, I don't know if that's like the best thing for me. You know what I mean? I'm like, I feel like not that family caused this, but it feels like it's I won't be able to be honest. So I went anyway, and I found my first ever therapist in New York through a friend. And I will say within a year, my mom noticed that I was so much like calmer and my mood had improved so much that she was like, oh, this is good. And so it was interesting seeing how her being able to see the impact made it less scary.
Mm-hmm. I don't know why, I get why. I'm like, I think, why is therapy so hard for certain brown parents? Why? Because they don't want you to, like, share your shit with other people.
Yeah.
Right? But it's like, those people don't give a shit about me, and so they're not going to tell anyone. Like, you know what I'm saying?
They're not like part
Whereas
of our society.
The aunties will, the family members will. They're going to literally tell everyone and their mother. So, like, what are you preventing from?
Oh my God. The first time, this is so random, but it just made me think of it. Many years ago, I was like really drunk at my cousin's wedding. And I like came out to a few of my aunts. I was like, yeah, like, and I had a boyfriend, but I just told them, like, yeah, I think I like women too. And one of my great aunts, who's like in her mid 70s, was like, yeah, me too. It was, and I don't really remember it, but the women that were my mom's age in that circle, the next day, I think they couldn't get over that this woman that was like their matriarch was like, yeah, me too.
Yeah, because like how many aunties and like whatever are out there that are gay that we just don't know about?
I'm like, auntie, you're gay. It's okay.
Yeah.
And then afterwards, when I thought about it, I'm like, oh, she's gay. I'm like, that makes so much sense.
Makes so much sense.
Yeah.
I mean, I like will sit at parties, family parties, and I'm like, how many of these people are gay and like just don't even know it, or know it and won't talk about it, or have just lived lives without denying that part of themselves. And I'm just like, imagine how much freer the world would be if people just like
were like, I'm gay.
Yeah.
Wait, where did you? I actually don't know this. Where did you grow up again?
I grew up in Palmdale, which is like, it's northeast of here.
Okay.
So it's like an hour away.
Got it.
Yeah.
And your family's still there?
My parents live there. They have a place in Santa Monica. So they're retiring. Right. So now they're gonna sell the house and move here full time.
That's nice.
Yeah.
And like, what have you lived in LA your whole life? Oh my God, there's a fly in here.
I grew up. Oh God, I hate when these flies go in.
I know, me too, but it's too hot.
When I was really young, before my sisters were born, we lived kind of in. I was born here, then we lived in New York a little bit, then we lived in Phoenix a little bit, then we finally came back to California to Palmdale when I was like 7.
Okay,
and then we've just lived there since.
Got it.
Then I went to college in Boston, I went to BU.
Nice.
And then I lived in San Francisco for grad school, but like mostly I've been in California.
Got it. Cool. And like I love, I mean, I met you kind of recently. So I
Yeah.
don't know everything, which is kind of fun because I get to learn about it. So what's been kind of your journey with, tell me a little bit about like your dating history, or just, I don't know, who's your first partner or who your first something. Give me some juice.
Honestly, dating is kind of complicated for me. I just had a lot of traumas in my youth that I thought were dating, and all these that I've kind of in my adult life unpacked. So honestly, I don't really think I have like ever had like a full boyfriend or girlfriend or anything like that, because things I thought were situations were actually just like traumatic and like kind of grooming situations that are, yeah. Which I don't really want to
No, you don't have
get
to.
into.
And
But
also by the way, that resonates.
yeah.
Like what you just said about things I thought were dating. Yeah, like I look back on certain things, I'm like, I can't believe I normalized that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There were just things that I thought were things that took up years of my life, well into my 20s. And then I think in my 30s, I was just like unpacking all of that and
Yep.
realizing that it was like traumatic, and also like like figuring out where, what, like, what do I like and who am I, right? And now I kind of just define myself as queer, which is just like, I don't
Catch
like
all.
to label myself,
Yeah.
you know? Like, I'm into people
Yeah.
and I like who I like, but I also just am like, why is everyone trying to like always figure out what my labels are? Like, do you?
I know. And also, like, I think about this all the time because I think it's very obvious to me intuitively when someone's a label person or not a label person.
Yeah.
And I only like non-label people.
Same.
And so I also feel like we're in this weird era of like over classifying everything. People are like, I'm bipolar 2 autistic. Like and I'm not saying those things aren't real. I get that for people it helps them figure out certain parts of themselves with that label. But what I struggle with there is I'm like, at the end of the day, we're all just constantly evolving and becoming, and like I also identify as queer because I'm like, I don't know, I just like people, and sometimes I have sex with women and sometimes men, and the most common question I get is like, oh, but like where do you fall on, like what percentage like wise are you likely to marry a woman or man? I'm like, I don't know. I don't know how to, like, what do you mean? They're just people are just people.
And
But-
that's also a really weird question. It was like, if you were completely straight and hetero, like, how would you know who you're gonna marry?
like
you
brunette
don't
versus
know.
blonde. What's the
Yeah.
percentage?
Like,
And I'm
that's just a weird question to ask someone.
well, it's a coded way of being like, I need you to be figured out.
Yeah.
Which is fine. I don't hold that against people. It's just the like people using labels to figure out who they are. I do think it's something I'm like, I have mixed feelings about. Yeah.
I think people want to be figured out, right? Like, even yourself, you're like, okay, like, at a certain age, I'll have my shit figured out. And it's like, no, you just realize as you get older that it's like a continual process.
Constant.
Yeah, and honestly, if it's not, then it's kind of boring. Like, what are you doing with your life?
Right. I my old writing teacher, she wrote this book called Women in 2014, and it's like this lesbian novella, and she came out much later in life, but the book is about a woman she dated. And in the foreword, this other woman writes about how like she realized she was kind of gay in her late 20s and then married a woman and then got divorced in her 30s. And she's like, for so long, I had so much shame around, I thought I had it figured out, and yet I don't. And then she came to that same conclusion of like, we're all just always figuring it out. Like, it's not like, oh, I tried this and I failed. It's just like, no, it was right at the time. And
Yeah.
10 years later, it wasn't. And like, it's okay that it wasn't.
Even like when I have traumatic situations, it's like I still gleaned some shit from that, right? Like, there were still really good moments in there too. And like that people find baffling. Like, how could it be traumatic if you really enjoyed some parts of it? And I'm like, that's not how life is. Like,
I know.
you know what I mean? Like, it's like blaming an abuse victim for like going back. Cause like,
For like seeing it with a nuanced lens.
yeah, like there's
Yeah.
just like, it's not like that. It's not black and white at
It's
all.
not. Well, and for me, like I mean, I just wrote that Paris piece, and in it I talk about like, oh, I was assaulted when I was like 25 by a friend. And for me, I talk about like how I've grown since then and, you know, what I've learned and how I've learned to trust men again. And so many people, when they read that piece, they're like, oh my God, are you okay? I'm like, that wasn't the point of it. I was just like talking about it. And maybe being able to talk about it is like progress in itself.
Yeah.
And honestly, part of it sounds like so bizarre, but part of the reason I'm grateful it happened is I don't think I would have started therapy if that hadn't happened. And oh my God, I've grown in so many different ways through just general therapy. And so in a way, I'm like, I mean, I don't know, it sounds weird, but I'm kind of glad it happened.
I mean, yeah, I think
Or not glad it happened. Maybe that's a strong phrase, but I see the purpose it played.
yeah, which I agree with. Like, I don't think you can grow as people if like nothing bad ever happens, right? And like, it's also weird to think that nothing bad would ever happen.
Also, people who are like nothing bad, the people I know in my life that are like nothing bad has ever happened, the most bad shit has happened to them. They're just like
Yeah.
completely dissociated. I'm
Like,
like,
are you? Yeah, that.
I'm like, what? And I'm like, never mind. We'll talk about it at a later date.
Yeah, and you can't be. I don't want to be the one that's pointing that out to them.
No, no, me neither. I don't say anything. It's just like an observation.
Yeah.
I'm like, wow, that's like an unhinged statement to make.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I know that recently you decided to seek out a sex therapist. What prompted that?
Well, it's like we were talking about before. Like, I just had all these in my normal therapy. I like realized I have all these traumas, and like I used to be like, and I still am like a very sexual person, but I kind of repressed that side of me for a while over the last like 5 to 10 years because I just like I was figuring out who I was, but I had these like traumas that were living in me that I wasn't expressing, right? And so I didn't really realize like why I was kind of like shying away from the whole thing, and I basically like had to go to therapy to like process that and realize, oh, that's why, right? But then sex and like dating and all of that is kind of like you need to practice it. And so when you feel like you've stepped away from it for so
Yes.
long, you feel blocked in certain ways. So like the reason I wanted to go to a therapist that like specialized in that was because like I want to like focus on how to get back into my body and like how to connect, because I feel like I can't connect my body with someone else's until I get back into my own, basically.
Yeah, that's true. And I love that concept, or not love, but it is so true when you haven't had practice in a while that it's like, how do I even start?
Yeah.
I've been there before. I'm like, oh my God, it's been like a couple years or whatever. And then it's hard to even talk about with like just a person.
Yeah, and I think like I lived in this era for so long where like people were so like just like, oh my God, you haven't had a like dated someone in so long. You haven't, and like they place so much emphasis on these types of things versus like what you have been doing to like heal yourself and grow yourself, and like none of the numbers or none of the like experience and all of that matters, right?
It's all bullshit.
Yeah, it's all bullshit. And so like it took me a while to get over that stuff too.
So true. It's like, it's kind of like when, like if I go on a date with somebody who's a lot older, like a man or a woman who's a lot older, and people will be like, oh, the label people will be like, oh, but has he or she ever been married? And if I say no, they're like, oh, that's weird. I'm like, as if the people that got married early have it all figured out. Like, I'm like, I know so many people, you know, so I think people try to like, yeah, again, label it in certain ways. Like, oh, you've been single for this long. Oh, you've never had a relationship. Oh, you've never had this or that. I'm like, plenty of people that have had those things, they haven't done any of the work to actually get there. They just like took the step because they thought it was what they were supposed to do.
And not everyone's goal in life is to be married.
Oh.
So like that's just something you can do, but a lot of people are still doing a lot of the stuff associated with relationships and dating without that end goal.
And it's like so much braver to do it. Like you're actually trying to be in your own body and facing something that's very difficult to face because it's not mainstream. That's so much harder
Yeah.
than just being like, I guess I'll just align my goals with whatever everybody like ChatGPT typical goals download. like, I'll just, you're like, I have a checklist on my wall. It's pretty generic.
Yeah.
And I think I truly believe that what's interesting is some of the people I've interviewed that are Gen Z, or even not approaching Gen Alpha, but 25 and younger. What's really refreshing is they don't seem to just subscribe to do it this way. Like some of them, especially depending on where they live and how they are. I've met more people that seem like they're actually thinking about what they want versus just like marriage being the end goal.
Yeah, and this is not to say, like, look, if marriage is your end goal, that's cool. But it's more just like I'm tired of people just doing things because they're supposed to do things.
Yeah.
Like, just, you can do what you want.
Yeah.
And, like, also just don't be afraid to question what everyone else is doing, too.
Right.
Because it often, like, I think that's why I was, like, so blocked for so many years, just in lots of things, not just sex, like, career and everything, because I was trying to fit into a picture that was just, like, not me.
Right.
No.
Oh, right, because you used to work in tech, right?
I used to work in tech. And I have nothing against that, but it's more just like I was working in tech. I was trying to like figure out why I couldn't just like date like a normal person, whatever that means. That's not even a thing. And then like why
Dating is weird.
I didn't want to just like get married, have the kids, like just move on with my life. But like I just was trying to fit a picture that wasn't me.
Right.
Right. And like, I realized it's not even knowing exactly what you want, because what I want often shifts. It's more just like being free to be me was like, it was just, I didn't feel like I could. So
right.
I was just doing all the wrong things, and that was like hurting myself more.
Did you feel like the expectation you put on yourself to be in whatever career you were in was by you or by other people, or kind of both?
It wasn't necessarily that it was by other people, because my parents were never like pressuring me to be like a certain type of person. It was just that because I couldn't they were like, the expectation was not that, oh, you have to be a doctor or a lawyer or whatever. It was more that be really successful at whatever you do, right? And so I didn't like, if I wanted to be an artist, I didn't have any examples of it. So I didn't know like exactly how to do it. So then I would like think that I have to do like a more professional field because that's more laid out for me. And there's like exact steps to get there. But then I would try to go into those fields and be like, I'm really unhappy.
Right.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I did the same thing. Like, I got so caught up in like the tech startup world when I lived in New York, and thinking like, this is what success means. I have to be like a successful founder, and here's what that looks like, and here's how the press wrote about what I'm working on, and this. And I got so burnt out from just like working against myself so much.
Yeah.
It was so horrible. It took me like years to come out of that. I was like, oh my God, like what am I doing?
Exactly.
It's really bizarre. It's not like a short. I think what I learned from that, right, is like, you just incur a lot of debt when you're going against yourself.
You do so much. And then, yeah, all like financial debt, but then also like emotional debt.
Spiritual debt.
Yeah, there's just so much.
Sexual debt.
Yeah.
Like, all of that is so tied together, right? Like, especially being like, I think in realizing I was queer, open to all genders, whatever it was, it also made me more open to this idea that like, oh, I've only been thinking of sex in a very specific way. Like, quite honestly, just like a dick enters a vagina, you have an orgasm, and then you like go to sleep.
Yeah.
Like there was no, like, I didn't think about anything else. And I can't believe I'm going to say this on a podcast. For me, it's relatively easy to orgasm. Yeah. And I think I thought of that as an accomplishment. And now I'm like, oh, but there's so much more. Like, I wasn't engaging like this. And so why I'm so interested in hearing about your journey of going to see your sex therapist as it evolves is I think I want to do it too, but I'm still in that process of like, what am I even looking for? And like, and it's kind of scary to acknowledge that there might have been something I've been missing my whole life. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, it is scary, but then it's also kind of like beautiful because you still get to experience something you've never experienced your whole life.
That's true.
Right?
That's true.
And I mean, I've always been a believer in like pleasure. And even when I didn't know, I loved pleasure. Like I think we're seeking out pleasure as humans, like whether it's sexual or whether it's like with friendship or whether it's like through art or however we are, we like dopamine hits to our body, right? Like we just like that. So like, but we are like humans are animals, and animals do like sexual pleasure. And so it's like when you don't tap into that, you are like leaving a whole part of yourself on the table that you could that could be unlocking other things for you too, right? So I, like you, I want to like use this experience to learn. I think like growing up when we did, like we only did have heterosexual education, and even
100%.
that was like barely anything.
It was
like,
barely anything.
It's not like my mom or dad sat me down and talked to me about that. Like everything I learned was like through friends or the internet or porn or whatever it is. And so like it was like we knew jack shit. And then like, so I too want to like learn more about that and like how to like experience that within myself and with someone else. And so I think that's why I'm trying to go on this journey. And I don't know, like I'm sure sex therapy will be like any other form of therapy where it's like you have to meet the right fit and like it might be a learning curve and like whatever it is. So like I don't know how it's gonna go, but it can't hurt.
And when you were looking for the one that you found, did you have specific criteria, or are you kind of like, let me just try one and see how it goes?
Well, so this one was actually just like recommended to me through a friend who has a really similar experience to me and is in a similar timeline now. So like the other thing for me is like I had an eating disorder for years of my life, and like just that's another reason I felt so disconnected from my body. And my body really changed after 35 in the last like 6-7 years, right? So like I am also not used to using this body type sexually. So I felt super disconnected from it. And with my regular therapist, I worked on so much of that. And so like now I kind of feel like the most free I've ever felt. So now I'm like ready to get back into that too and like date and figure that out. And, you know, it's like I'm 20 again, basically.
I love it. Although like, it's like almost like it's better than being 20.
Yeah, because now I don't feel like so lost in life.
And you don't feel like you don't deserve pleasure.
Exactly.
Which I feel like looking back, I'm like, I think I just didn't know if I felt like I deserved it. Like I used to feel guilty when I would kiss women, or like the next morning I would be like, why did I do that? Like, why did I sleep with her naked in bed? Or like I had shame around it. Looking back, I'm like, I was just fucking queer. Like, what was the big deal?
Yeah.
So stupid. We haven't even done intros, but I think I want to talk a little bit about your inspiration behind Kitty Party and kind of how you're kind of like you are somebody who prioritizes pleasure both in your personal life, but also I think in your work as a designer and all the other things you do. So tell me a little bit about like how Kitty Party was born and how it like influences your design even.
So Kitty Party, okay, so a little history on Kitty Party is Kitty Parties were parties that Indian women started holding after the partition in India, okay? And basically they had no like economic power in the family structures because men still held that whole power. So they would throw parties, and people just thought these were like frivolous women partying, but they would charge a fee to enter the party, which was called a kitty. And they used this like they would collect the money, and whenever a family was in trouble or whatever it was, they used this money to help the families out and help each other out. And so even though these were just parties where they could like vibe in friendship and like hang out and like try things that they're not allowed to try at home, like drinking or playing cards or whatever it is, they were actually economically empowering themselves. And so it carried on throughout years, and women would have get-togethers and like they would call them kitty parties, and people just always thought these were like gossiping ladies and blah blah blah. And like even my parents who came from India, they were like, we never knew the history of Kitty Party. And I'm like, yeah, there's a lot of history there. People when women are hanging out, people often label it as like frivolous or whatever and bullshit, but it's like there's like a real powerful thing when between female friendships, basically. Like
Huge.
it literally saved my life throughout all these years when I had a lot of mental health crises and just like was figuring all these things we've been talking about out. All the women in my life kind of helped save me, right? Like, and so like my art pieces that I call Kitty Party are all like love letters to these different women and like just humans in my life that like helped keep me alive, right? So then as I slowly started getting into the art field, I just like love my favorite moments of being an artist is like when I'm out in the community sharing art, but also seeing other people's art and just like interacting through art, right? And so I wanted to create my own modern day kitty parties that are basically like art experiences, but they're also, they bring together all forms of art, like music and dancing and fine art and like food and all of that. So that's kind of what it was.
Oh my God, I can't believe I knew nothing about the history of kitty parties in India.
Yeah.
I had no idea. That's amazing.
So yeah, I think women are out here like doing the damn thing always and finding a way to do it.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I've been interviewing women in my mom's generation and above just for a few years, just kind of for fun about what their marriages were actually like. And because as they get older, they're just more open because they're like, all right, I'm getting older. Nobody's asking me anything. And one of my favorite things, one of my aunts said to me is she's like, yeah, I mean, she's telling me how she moved to the US from India with her husband who she was arranged to. And she's like, I didn't realize, but we were then moving into this like suburb of Pennsylvania and I was going to be living with his entire extended family. So she's like, it was really hard. And she always wanted to get her PhD and or become a doctor. But of course they made that hard, right? And they made it hard for her to pursue her stuff. And then she got pregnant and she goes, I mean, yeah, we had no space in the house. Like, so we were just stuck in our room all the time. What was there to do but fight and fuck? And she said this in a room full of a bunch of people. And I was like, that's so... It's so funny and it's so dark and it's also just so relatable and that's fascinating, right? Because me and her come from completely different countries, completely different generations. I'm not even that close to her. And I thought it was really interesting that we have this almost like similar dark sense of humor, but also similar experiences and this universal language of pleasure almost, right? The fact that she knew that, right?
I love that. Like, I love that she shared that with you too. Because I feel like I think we should ask. I also appreciate that you're asking her these questions because I think you're right. Like I think like so many of these aunties like no one asks them shit.
No.
So like
she told me that. She's like, nobody ever asks me anything. I'm gonna die soon. So I would like to tell someone. I'm like, because I asked her, I'm like, do you I actually said this. I was like, do you feel comfortable talking to me about this? And how is it that you're so comfortable also saying this when you know that all these men in our family are within earshot? And that's what she said. She was like, who cares? Like, nobody ever asked me anything.
Yeah. And they're used to being dismissed and like, you know.
Yeah.
But they're probably full of so many pearls.
I know.
And like, just think if we had always all chatted about all these things, like how much more knowledgeable we would all be.
Yeah.
About stuff.
Last year for Thanksgiving, my mom sent this. We were hosting at my parents' place in Detroit. I come from like this big extended family. Everybody lives there, hundreds of us. And my mom sent a WhatsApp message to just the women for some reason saying, hey, we're going to be hosting. Here's what we're cooking. And I think the way my mom meant the message was make sure to invite your families, but I'm just putting the women on this text thread for simplicity. But one of my cousins thought, who's married with children, thought mistakenly that we were doing a women's only Thanksgiving. So she like immediately told her husband, she's like, okay, I'm super excited. It's just gonna be like women only, like you have to make your own plans. And then I had to call her and tell her like, no, like families are invited.
I love that she was so excited for a second.
She was like, oh my God, I just thought it was going to be like us cooking in our pajamas and then the men could just like order pizza and watch football. And I thought it was so funny that she was that willing to just ditch her husband the day of. She's like, all right, like fuck it. Like, and her husband's actually the chef in their family. He's great. But she was saying, she's like, I just feel like the women in our mom's generation, they're much more open about things when their husbands aren't there. So she's like, I just wanted to see what would happen if we just got to spend like a lot of time with them, just chatting. I was like, okay, next time. I'm like, noted. A future, maybe a kitty party.
Let's do it. I would love to do a kitty party that's hosted by our moms.
Yeah. Okay, I'm manifesting this for us.
Because I think it would be awesome. And like, I think that's why also with that first kitty party, it was so important for me to like, I had drag performers and I had like all kinds of like just openness because I knew there was going to be aunties there and I want to expose them to this.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And just apparently during one of the drag performances, one auntie just like left in a huff and puff and do something. This is so inappropriate. And I was like, oh,
you're like, grow up, auntie.
Yeah. Honestly, I don't know who it was. It wasn't anyone I knew because everyone I knew had already like wasn't there. But I'm just curious, like who was it? But anyways, all that to say is that yeah, I would love to do it. Auntie kitty party.
Oh my God. Well, if you ever take kitty party around the US, I think in Michigan all my aunts would go.
Oh my God, I would love that. It is. We are planning to take kitty party to other cities. It's just a big endeavor, and I'm like, okay.
You're like, do it at your pace, and don't do it because you feel like you have to. Feel like we know this. Nothing ever goes well when you feel like you have to do something.
It's true.
What are you most like? I know you haven't had a full session with your sex therapist yet, but did she have any intake forms or like what's the process of?
Well, we had a phone call that was like almost an hour. So which she explained to me because like this therapist is like different than like, well, I don't know what a normal sex therapist is to be honest, but this is more through dance. So she was just explain this because she teaches something called S Factor, which is like pole dancing basically.
Okay.
But it's not like most people who take it aren't trying to become pole dancers or like, and it's not even about like dance as exercise. Like this is for your emotional and sexual and spiritual healing. So she was just explaining to me what it's gonna look like and like asking me questions about like what am I trying to get out of this and just where I'm at life and all that. So like that's all she kind of just got the 411 on like why I'm doing like kind of what you asked me.
Got it.
Yeah.
So you're approaching it kind of from the somatic piece of it.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
And then Saturday's the first session, so
Sex Saturday is what you call it?
No, I said Saturday is the first session. But it should be Sex Saturday.
We're just gonna call every Saturday Sex Saturday.
Sex Saturday.
I think I was thinking about this randomly the other day. I was like, I used to not think of masturbation as part of my sex life, but it is. And when I was doing couples therapy in my last relationship, I'd be like, oh, like I just don't feel sexual, and she would correct me, and she's like, you do because you're masturbating. You just like don't want to fuck your partner, which is a different thing. And that was really revolutionary for me. And the other day I was like, I actually have like a decent sex life. I masturbate a lot. But
all the time. Like, that keeps me sane.
Yeah. But I'm definitely in the phase of with other partners. It's not that I won't. It takes me a little bit longer to get there. I'm more careful. And not because maybe I'm scared. I don't know. But I now think I have a deeper understanding of the way that I feel connected to somebody through sex. And it just means something different to me than it used to.
Yeah. I think like I'm not really like a bullshitter even in like I hate small talk. Right. Yeah. But I just like, I would imagine like sexually even like I can't just fuck someone that I'm like not at all connected to. And that doesn't mean I need to like marry you or date you or anything, but we do have to have some kind of connection. Yeah. You know? It's
kind of like sapio-y. Like I need to feel like something.
Yeah.
Otherwise it just feels like, why? Like what? I don't know. And it didn't used to, in my 20s, I didn't feel that way. Like I feel like the era I grew up in, it was seen as liberating for women to just like have a lot of sex. And that's extremely unnuanced. It's not that that's not liberating. There's a liberation element to that, but I think it's important to feel connected to.
Yeah. And I think like we also got placed in a box if you like needed connection to have sex, like, oh my God, now they're going to get attached. They're going to do this. And it was like, no, man, I just like need to like know something about you and like feel like I actually like you as a person.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
I learned a lot. I tried the app Field last year, and it was really interesting. So Field is this app where they have you like it's just very sex forward is how they position themselves.
Yeah, I have a profile on there, but I never used it because I just don't like apps. But
Yeah, same. I used it. I never met up with anybody on it, but
Yeah.
I like downloaded it and then I made a profile and I had to Google so much stuff. I'm like, what is this kink?
oh
Or
my
what is
God,
that
or
kink?
like I didn't
anything.
even know all the acronyms on
No.
there and all this. I'm like, everyone just like knows everything. I'm like, I don't know what like like all of these.
I was
are.
like,
have
I
to look
guess
up
I'm
everything.
prude. Like,
Yeah.
should I just make my bio? I'm fucking prude.
Or I just don't know all the terminology.
Yeah. Or I felt like I had to study.
Yeah.
And then I don't use apps anymore either. So then I just never used it. Or I talked to a few people on it like a year and a half ago, and then I just never met up with anybody. But
Well, I have a few friends that have used Field. Like one of my friends, who is the person who actually told me about Field, I think last year or the year before, they are like almost 50, but were in like some terrible relationships in their younger years and who were like pretty abusive and just like made them feel like shit. So they never got to like explore their sexual side. So in their 40s, they were like, we just want to explore sex and learn about our bodies and all that stuff. So they downloaded Field and had some really amazing experiences that like made them like feel really empowered. So they asked me to download it and I tried. This was like when I was on this journey and I tried, but I can't do apps because I can't like, I get overwhelmed by all the messages and then I get all like, I find it hard to like text my friends back. So if I don't know you, it's really hard for me to text you back and stuff like that.
neurodivergent queer artists are not meant to be on apps. I'm just gonna.
I'm like, I just have to go out in the world and like,
Yeah,
go with God.
it's true. I know I can't. I didn't even delete them. I just kind of naturally fall off of them because I realized it wasn't helping me with anything. I'm
Yeah.
like, what am I doing here? And also, I think becoming an artist. I have this like very deep-seated belief that like I'm like no, like when you create energy, the right energy kind of comes back to you.
I believe that.
So, and it's a good filter, right? Like I'm speaking at this conference in September and I'm handing out this like zine that we're creating together right now. And in it, there's a lot of like kind of overtly sexual stories and just things about me. And it's such a good filter because I'm like, if someone's not okay with that, then cool, then they don't like me.
Yeah.
It's like perfect.
Yeah, exactly.
And if they like it, then they really like it. So I feel like it creates like a good, it feels much more resonant for me than like an app where someone's like, okay, she's 5'2", she's looking for a relationship, she like smokes weed occasionally. Okay, I guess I'll mess it. Here's a picture. Like I'm like, what is this?
And I just feel like most people aren't even reading anything on there. They're just looking at the photos. And I don't know. It's hard.
It makes no sense.
Yeah. It gives me more anxiety than anything because I'm like, oh, now I have like 40 messages I have to respond to. And like probably 36 of them are not going to ever respond back. So like, it's just too much.
Or they're bots
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah. It's too much. I'm like, no.
What's your favorite, and if you don't know this yet, because I know you're about to go to therapy and figure some of this out, but this is just something I randomly thought about. What's your favorite part of foreplay? Like, is it, I don't know, or do you have something you like?
I think I need to figure that out, but I'm old school and I just love making out.
Me
love
too.
making out. Yeah.
I was literally thinking mine's just kissing. Mine's hot conversation.
Oh yeah. Conversation is like my favorite thing. My favorite thing. Even with my friends, they're always just like a lot drunk because like I love asking the most philosophical shit, especially if I'm really drunk and I'm just like, and I'll put it out there and I'll listen
like
to
what?
people's. I don't know. I'll be like, I don't know. I'll just be like, I can't think of anything right now, but you know what I mean? Like,
I'm like, say something funny.
Yeah. I get really like, if you were like, if you could only at this moment like pick 3 things to take with you and that's all you could live with, like what would, and then I would like I'll be in a room full of strangers and make everyone answer that and everyone's like shut up, Rog, and I'm like, no, this is how you get to know people.
Yeah, I like it.
You have to ask this kind of shit.
You're like the awkward icebreaker. You're into it.
Yeah, but like in a fun way. I'm not gonna like make everyone's.
You're not gonna be like, what's your what's your 3 worst traumas?
Yeah. And I won't, and I'll usually like go around. I'm not gonna like make everyone talk to the whole group or anything that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But like, I'm just like not. I'm just really bad at bullshitting, so I'm like going to ask you real shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're like, what is? I think this is a Curb thing where he's like, he talks about medium talk. He's like, I don't like small talk, but something about medium talk.
Yeah.
This is something I ask usually at the beginning, but I'll ask you now. What is your emotional relationship to your eyebrows?
To my eyebrows? I have bangs, so I have my eyebrows.
I know. Same.
But my emotional relationship to them is that I don't have like, unlike most brown girls, I don't have hairy eyebrows. And it really annoys me because you can barely see them.
Oh, interesting. You don't like that. It feels like white girl brows.
Yeah, I want thicker eyebrows. So that's
interesting.
Yeah, so I'm always like, when I don't have bangs, I'm like trying to fill them in with other shit. Like either I dye them or pencil them in or whatever.
Got it.
But I wish they were hairier. I know. I'm like probably the only brown girl that's ever said that.
That's interesting. I get that. It's kind of like being a brown girl. Like I know brown girls who don't feel like they have nice hair. They're like, it's such a thing because they're like, every brown girl has nice hair.
Yeah. I know. I'm like, I have really thick hair everywhere else. Why is it not on my face?
Yeah. But I feel like that's honestly like you can pencil like.
Yeah.
That's an okay one.
Yeah.
It's I feel like I have average brows, but I did when I was young, I bumped into a glass table. So I have like a little hole here. So whenever I go to a new person for threading, they always comment on the hole.
You're like,
so I'm like, I have to stick with the same person. I can't go through this again.
Yeah. It's like the aunties when you're younger and you'd go to a party and they're like, Beta, your pimple is so big. And you're like, thank you. If you didn't say that, I would have never known. I would have never known.
It's true. And when I was in 7th grade or 8th grade, I think that's the first time I got my eyebrows threaded. And my mom was like, oh, like, it only hurts the first time. False. It always hurts.
Threading hurts like a motherfucker. I just don't understand. I've done it for like 25 years and it still hurts like the first time.
And I'm always anticipating it now. So it's actually worse than the first time because the first time I didn't know.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, I guess whatever. Now I'm like, oh my God, it's going to happen. It's coming. And I always wait so long that they have to also then trim the hairs and it just takes forever.
Yeah.
But I don't know why I like asking that question because even white people have an answer for that.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. I started seeing a psychiatrist a few months ago because I was like, I think I have ADHD or I don't know, or something. And she pretty quickly diagnosed me with the labels like anxiety, depression, like all the awesome things. So I started medication and on a very light dose and like anti-anxiety medication. And then when I doubled the dose per her instruction, I like felt like I was going crazy. So after 3 days, I stopped it. And then after a couple days, I felt totally fine. Like it was just medical. But what I didn't like about my psychiatrist was I felt like she just wasn't super helpful during the time when I was like losing it. And I was like, oh, I need somebody that's like going to cuddle me a little bit more.
Yeah. And
I
like,
didn't like that. I was like, help me. Like, why do I feel crazy?
Psychiatrists are not good at that. Most psychiatrists like just want to get you diagnosed and give you medication.
Yes.
They're not going to handhold you. Like therapists, psychologists are way better at that, and so are therapists.
Then they can't prescribe medication. So then it's like this weird thing.
You have to have a team, basically.
Yeah. Which it's labels aside, I think one thing I've just like really accepted is I'm like, yeah, being a child of immigrants is like, especially whatever, it's hard. And then added layer of being a woman, there's like difficulty on top of that. So.
And queer,
like all of the things. And so I'm not somebody that's like, oh, I feel weak because I got diagnosed with all these things. I really just want help. I'm like, I want to feel good.
You just want to like live your best life and like feel good about it and like.
And I know that I have so much potential. I'm like, I'm not going to be able to achieve it if I don't figure this out. So it's worth the time and money investment.
Yeah.
I feel like it's also kind of the thing though, like finding a therapist that also like kind of resonates with like your lifestyle, like almost like, and it's like similar to you, like in a sense of like ethnically like similarity and like your kind of upbringing and stuff like that also helps. That's like what I've
really helps.
Somebody where I'm like, I don't know if I can talk to you about this issue because
I can't teach you about this.
Yeah, exactly.
And honestly, like my sister's in therapy school right now. It's like taught from a very white lens, like for better or worse. And like my first couple therapists were white, and honestly, like they would just be like, this person's toxic and that person's toxic and you can't fuck with them anymore and you can't. And I'm like, bro, I am brown. I am not just cutting people out. I am not going to just stop talking to my mom or my dad or my family. Like, we are community-based systems, and I don't believe in just cutting people out. And so
I agree.
I had to find a brown therapist that like understood those family
With
systems and
nuances.
yeah. Because it doesn't, like, I'm toxic to someone and I hope they don't just cut me out, right? Like, you can communicate and talk to people and figure your shit out. And obviously there are people that
I'm fucking
need
toxic all the
boundaries
time.
with, right? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I hear that.
So I just, I do agree. You do have, like, you have to find someone that gets you and your background.
I found that for me, actually, more so than brown therapists I've liked the most that I've had have been Black women who are first generation. Because with brown women, sometimes if they haven't worked through their own stuff, they can actually be kind of problematic.
Yeah.
That's what I've experienced. Maybe I haven't talked to enough, but in the 3 or 4 that I've had, the Black women have been the most helpful for me. And I also feel like they're more like open about certain things that sometimes with brown women it just depends.
Yeah. And it's hard, and it is harder to find brown women.
It is. There's not many.
There's not many.
And then some of the ones there's not many. That's like a huge
I'm like 30.
Yeah.
When I was looking.
I
was like, oh my god.
Yeah. It's like filter brown. They're like, here's one person in your area. She does not take insurance.
Well, that's part of the reason why like I went to school for psychology, because I was like, there's nobody in this field. And then I was like, I got the degree and I was like, kind of out of music a little bit more. So I went with that. But like that was literally like why I went into it, because I was like, there's nobody that fits that demographic that a lot of people are looking for in therapy these days, where it's just like, okay, I'm not comfortable talking to this type of person, male, woman, like kind of whatever. Like non-binary, whoever, like trying to figure out like, all right, just who's the most comfortable I can talk to get the like help that I need and stuff. So
that's cool that you did that.
Yeah, that was like one of the reasons why I was like, okay, and then it turned out for not, but maybe who knows?
You never know. Music and therapy are not like art and therapy are so intertwined. And
I think music is too, for sure.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. In terms of like, I guess putting it all out there, like emotionally wise, like it's something that's very, I guess therapeutic in a way. Like kind of, all right, I don't have to say it to somebody, but I can kind of express it in a non. Sort of concrete, more of an abstract way of expressing
stuff,
music has like helped me get through so many periods of my life where I couldn't like define my own feelings or emotions. I like found it in other people's music. You know,
music is so, that when I had to compose or work with a musician to compose original scores for 2 different projects I've worked on that were very personal, and it was so wild to go through the process of like working with a musician where she'd be like, okay, explain the emotional arc of the scene. And then she would compose to it. And specifically for Lonely Girl, the show I made about my own queer coming out journey, I was like sobbing sometimes in meetings because I'm like, I'm like, musicians are so tapped into emotion, and her drawing this out of me it was like therapy. I was like, she's drawing things out of me that I don't think I would have been able to get to in therapy. Like it would be like a line I said that I'm like, that's so funny. And she would be like, is it?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh yeah, it's not. And that was like hard to contend with.
Right.
Because I wrote it, I acted in it. I'm like watching myself say it. I'm like, it's like that thing you said about what I thought was dating or funny was not. That was, whoa, that person was like fucking with me or something. And I felt like in composing this stuff with her, it was super therapeutic because, and yeah, again, in a way that I don't think talk therapy would have gotten me there.
Right. Yeah, because I feel like that's like kind of where I struggle with a lot of the times. It's like actually explaining coherently like what's going on. So like a lot of times I'm just like, listen to this. This is what it is right now,
And how songs can just like bring you to, I mean, it's like even with dance, right? When you come back to just something somatic or movement based or audio based, there is something it creates. that's like
yeah,
different.
it's like core memories basically. Like music can take me right back to like a spot or a smell or a place.
What song are you thinking about right now that, I don't know, what's a song that takes you somewhere?
I mean, there's just all kinds of songs in my life, but like this is so random, but my friend Samantha and I always joke about how when we were writing a movie together about just friendship, but I always tell her how I love music. It's my first love. Like I'm not a musician, but music is like helped me through every point of my life. And my dad would buy me tapes when I was little because obviously like CDs or whatever didn't even exist.
Yeah.
And so I didn't have a tape player at that time, but I had a Teddy Ruxpin and I would always play my tape. But so my Teddy Ruxpin would be like blasting like Whitney Houston
Love
and
it.
like I Want to Dance with Somebody or whatever, or like Janet Jackson, and like all it would always be coming on my. But I like can remember exact moments with like Whitney and Janet and Michael Jackson, like just all these people that
I
like,
love that.
Yeah.
That's really specific.
Yeah.
I'm really attached to movie through TV. Like when I'm attached to like a story in a show and then they play certain music at certain like moments, I like remember it. That's how I remember it.
Yeah.
And then for whatever reason, the song I'm thinking about right now, it's so random. But remember the band Yellow Card?
Yeah.
There's like this song, I think it's called Ocean Avenue.
Okay.
And for some reason, when I listen to that song,
is it about this Ocean Avenue?
I must be. Yeah. I didn't even grow up here. I grew up in Detroit, so I don't. Yeah, it must be.
Yeah.
But I used to date just Indian boy potheads. That was like my type growing up. And one of them, he was into Yellow Card. And for some reason, whenever I hear that song, I think about being 16 and like smoking with him. It brings me like right back.
Oh my God.
And he was so toxic and I was so toxic. So I like the feeling of free toxicity.
Yeah. I know.
Yeah. You know more about me than like, most of my friends.
Same. I feel like it's so funny, but all these like newer relationships in my life probably know me so much better than some of my oldest relationships. And it's not because like they know me in a different way, the older friends, but like I'm just more me than I've ever been.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes. Oh my God. I feel the same way. And it's not that my old friends don't accept me at all. It's just we met under very different circumstances. We just happen to be part of the same community.
Yeah, and like they've seen you through so much evolution, but it's hard when you know people to let go of some of what you've known of them.
Yes. That's so true.
Yeah.
Yeah. The people that I'm meeting now, I'm like, oh, it's amazing. But I'm like, oh, these are probably lifelong co-creators. That's the biggest difference that I've felt in the last few months as I create more content that can just live out there without it needing to be like greenlit by a studio or whatever. I'm like, I'm starting to meet people that feel not just like friends, but co-creators, which feels really different. And I think there is a bond that gets formed between people you're creating with.
I agree.
Or around.
I agree.
Yeah.
Because you're creating with them, but then you're also like this experience is going to inspire something that I do personally as well, right?
Yes.
So you're creating inspired by the interactions as well.
And it is kind of sapphic and sexual and
Yeah.
pleasurable to create with someone. Like it
is.
It's intimate.
Oh my God. When you were asking like what, I forgot exactly what you were asking, but like what are you looking for, whatever, like being able to create with someone, even if they're not directly an artist, like just being with someone in an artistic way is like so beautiful.
I think it's like not my only requirement, but like a baseline.
Yeah.
At this point, which I think about a lot. I'm like, I'm looking for like a co-creator.
Yeah.
And you're right. It doesn't even have to be somebody who's traditionally an artist. It just has to feel like we're creating something.
Yeah.
Together.
Even if it's like life, you're just creating life. But like, do you know what I mean?
I love that. Oh my God, let's end on that. I love that. To creating life.
To creating
Thank
life.
you, Mom.
Cheers.
Cheers.